Okay, from Cary, North Carolina, a bastion of sobriety with roots in another tremendous bastion of sobriety in Cincinnati, Ohio, and down to our bastion of sobriety, Key West, I give you Beth.
Good morning. I didn't know I was going to get... Oh, come on. Good morning.
Good morning.
I always say I walk into a room full of people, and it separates into two groups, all of you and me. And sometimes that doesn't go away. I didn't know I was going to get such a workout this morning. Thanks for the exercise. My name's Beth Hartley. I'm an alcoholic. And because of the grace of God and the fellowship and steps of AA and sponsorship, I've been sober since June 26, 1988. And that amazes me every time I say it. I want to thank Katie and the committee for asking us down here. It's always an honor to be asked to participate in Alcoholics Anonymous anywhere. And I have to tell you about my last trip to Key West. I used to live in the Upper Keys in the early 80s, and then through a series of bad breaks and misunderstandings, was forced to move back to Ohio. And I was back in Ohio about 4 years and had this passing thought, like, I bet everybody in Florida really misses me. I should go down. So in 1988, in June of 1988, I decided to run away from home again and got a one-way ticket down here and spent a few days here and there in Florida and came to Key West on June 24th, 1988, which is 2 days before my sobriety date. And I was trying to find this guy named Ted that used to bartend at Holiday Isle when I worked there up in Almirada. And so I found out where he worked, called him. He's supposed to meet me at Sloppy Joe's. I go to Sloppy Joe's. Now, you have to know, when I drank, I had a huge capacity for alcohol. I didn't pass out. I didn't fight. I didn't fall down. I didn't throw up. I just, was like the Energizer Bunny. I mean, I could just drink. But I got to Sloppy Joe's and apparently passed out. And the injustice of it is they didn't wake me up to throw me out until after Ted had been and gone and couldn't find me because, of course, I was asleep on the table. And then they threw me out, which I didn't think was fair at all. So I wanted to find the Green Parrot because those were really my people over there, the bikers. And it took me, I don't know how many trips around the island before I found it because it's so big here, anybody could get lost. And I got to the Green Parrot and ended up getting in a fight over a pool table in the quarters on the pool table and got asked to leave there. And it takes some talent to get thrown out of the Green Parrot. And so I ended up, driving partway up the Keys, passing out in a parking lot, waking up the next morning. It's, 100 degrees. I'm in the car with the car windows up. Thought maybe I should go back over to Bonita Springs and see my real friends that I hadn't seen in, 10 years. And got over there, called my friend, and my ex-husband, who was supposed to be states away somewhere else, is staying at their house. And got drunk there that night, ended up in the Fort Myers airport on Sunday, June 26, 1988, without a way home, and I've been sober ever since. So when they asked me if I'd ever been to the Keys, I thought, this is like returning to the scene of the crime. It was a much more pleasant trip this time. And, it's not so hard to find your way around here. It was amazing. I was like, I could find it from one day to the next. Anyway, I do live in Cary, North Carolina now. You can probably tell from my lack of accent that I'm not originally from there. Chuck and I relocated from Cincinnati 2.5 years ago to Cary, and they said, actually, we just relocated to North Carolina, but they sent us to Cary because Cary stands for the Containment Area for Relocated Yankees. And so they told us we had to live there. They just keep us all in one place. I actually grew up in Oxford, Ohio. I was born in Northern California, and my family moved to Ohio when I was 2. And by the time I was 6, that was my first resentment. I remember looking at a map as a kid and seeing California and Florida and all the water and and then there's Ohio. And at 6 years old, I knew, looking at a map, you could tell nothing was going on in Ohio. I wanted out of there from first grade on. I knew it was warmer other places. I just hated it there. And I was an only child, but we always lived next door to families with a lot of kids, so I would just kind of morph into their family. My father joined Alcoholics Anonymous when I was 7 years old in 1966. Let me do the math for you. I'm 46, so you won't have to spend any time figuring that out. But my dad joined AA when I was 7 years old. And so I knew about AA. I knew AA existed. I knew it meant you didn't have to drink. I don't really remember his drinking. My mom is an alcoholic, so we didn't have the craziness in the house. She's a cupboard door slammer. That's as violent as it got at our house. So I just didn't, I didn't have all that stuff. I had a sober parent. I had, I was an avid reader as a child, which I think is why school came so easily to me, because I'm not, it wasn't work ethic. But it was easy, so I could do school. And I just had all this thinking going on, even as a kid, that Dick talked a lot about it last night, that there were all these voices in my head that would take my inventory for me and tell me how you didn't really like me and how you just put up with me because you had to. And you guys were talking about me. And I was a spectator in my own life. There was a Zoom camera out here that I used to watch all of you watch me, And if I was talking to you over here, I had to be sure we looked animated so you guys over here saw us talking. And didn't you wish you were with us? And I just I didn't know how to have a conversation. I didn't know how. I was 6 months sober before I realized I was talking to somebody and they would say something and I would say something and they would say something. It was so cool, because usually you would start to talk and all the people in my head would be filling in what you were going to say and choosing from possible answers, And now I'm talking second grade here. I'm not drinking yet. I had these principles I lived by. One was it's not all right not to know. And that also goes way back. Don't tell anybody if you don't know how to do it. For God's sakes, don't ask a question. I was operating on fake it till you make it long before I got here. And the other thing was never, ever, ever, ever tell somebody that you made a mistake. I had a one-night stand turn into a 5-year marriage based on that principle, we knew by 3 or 4 weeks in it was probably doomed, but neither one of us was going to cry uncle by God. And I won, though. He finally threw me out 5 years later. It was his fault. So, but, if I couldn't be good at something, I didn't want to do it because I didn't want to look bad in public. If I was trying something new, I would be sure I was trying alone so you wouldn't see me in case I failed. If you were good at things, I thought, maybe because reading came easily, I don't know, but I thought you were either good at stuff or you weren't. I never put together that the people who played piano well were the same people who couldn't come out and play because they had piano lessons. I just never connected those dots. I just thought, how nice for you that you're gifted and you can play the piano. And there's a story I always tell about my daughter because it so clearly illustrates to me how different my thinking was long before I drank. Because of course when I got here I thought drinking was my problem. And now I know, long before I took a drink, it was all in motion. When Sarah was 11, she wanted to be on a swim team. And I have to tell you, my children were 4 and 6 when I got sober. And we were pretty sure that Sarah would end up in these rooms. Even at 4, we were looking at her just thinking, oh, man. She had that gleam in her eye, and she could look right at you and lie and just not miss a beat, And that's a skill you need around here. And, we used to tell people, most people save for college, we're saving for treatment. So when she was 11, she wanted to be on a swim team, and we got her a few lessons. She hadn't been in the pool much, and she went and tried out for this team that all her friends were on. And the coach told her, you could be on the team, but you should practice down an age group because you can't keep up with your age group. Now, this was okay with her. That would not have been okay with me. At 11 years old, I would have been saying, excuse me, I'm 11. How's that going to look if I swim with the 9-year-olds, But this was okay with her. And she went to her first, they had a swim meet, 2 weeks later or something. She went to her first swim meet, and it was one of the USS teams where they just run heat after heat after heat and post the results. And she was 70th out of 72. And she went back the next day. I would have been trying to get my parents to move. Far away. And we told her, Sarah, you didn't win, but now you have a baseline time. And if you beat your time, you've had a successful race, even if you don't win. Now, the whole time I'm telling her this, I'm thinking, yeah, right, it's all about winning, I mean, I swam. My parents told me the same thing. I didn't believe a word of it. I knew it's like in the parent self-esteem handbook. You know, that's what you tell your kids when they don't win. You know, you still had a good race, honey. But I never bought into that. She beat her time. She was happy. You know. Now, the rest of that story is 2 years later, she was a state AA swimmer. You know. Somewhere along the line, she listened when they talked about set a goal, work for the goal, achieve the goal. That went over my head. You know, my outlook on life by 11 years old was, give me the goal. You know, work for it. What's that? And so at 11 years old, neither one of us had ever had a drink, and we were just miles apart on how we dealt with life. And so we, you know, Chuck and I began to suspect something was a little wrong with her because she just wasn't thinking like we thought. And she got on up into high school, and I guess her junior year in high school, after 11th grade, you know, they opened a Starbucks in our town, and she came home from school and said they went to Starbucks, and we said, oh, good, who'd you go with? And she said, Lindsay, Katie, and Jennifer, and I said, oh, her? And she looked up and said, for God's sakes, Mom, that was 6th grade. Could you let it go? So Chuck and I looked at her and said, you know, there's supposed to be one mature person in the house. Congratulations. We're pretty sure it's you. And, you know, when she was 11 swimming with the 9-year-olds, I was 7 years sober at the time, and I was having kind of a hard time being the mother of the 11-year-old who was swimming with the, you know, with the 9-year-olds, because how's that going to make me look? You know, I just can't. You know, we just started to suspect we had a normal thinker in our house because, you know, I just saw how different I was. You know, what that did for me is it let me see how off I was long before I took a drink. I didn't drink until I was 15 years old. I don't know why. I just didn't. And when I did, I didn't get falling down drunk the first time because some of my friends were experimenting with alcohol. They were falling down. They were throwing up. It looks bad. I don't like to look bad, you know, so I just kind of put a glow on the first time. Took my best friend out, got her drunk with me the next day, so I'd have somebody to drink with, and that friendship didn't last a year after that because we drank different from the start. Now, before I drank, I was a frenzy of activity. I mean, I was a cheerleader. I was in the pep club. I was in the band. I was on the yearbook staff. I was busy. And now I know it's because I couldn't stand to sit still. I couldn't sit alone even for a minute. One of the most precious promises in the big book for me is the one that says we can be alone at perfect peace and ease. We can look the world in the eye. Because I couldn't do that. If I was alone for a minute, the voices started telling me how you just hung out with me because you had to and you didn't really like me. It didn't matter what kind of commitment I had. If you asked me to go somewhere, forget that commitment. I'm going with you. Because I knew if I didn't go with you, you would never ask me again. And if you got out without me, you might start talking amongst yourselves and realize that you didn't really like me. And I thought she was your friend. And no, I asked her because I thought she was your friend. And, you know, I couldn't afford for you to get far enough away from me to realize that you could do without me. And so I just, you know, and I had all this stuff going on because I couldn't sit alone. It was too noisy by myself. And when I started to drink, those activities just started to go away. You know, one at a time, two at a time. Some of them I gave away. Some of them were taken from me. They frown on their cheerleaders, you know, skipping school and getting busted in bars and stuff. And some things slipped away, and I didn't even know they were gone, you know, because alcoholism's cunning, baffling, and powerful. And I can't tell you how many times over the years I've gotten pieces of my life back that I didn't even know were missing. You know, I grew up in a college town, a small college town, Oxford, Ohio, where Miami University is, and so I was going to college football games at 6 years old, you know. And I didn't realize until Chuck and I went to a University of Cincinnati game at, I don't know how many years sober, 3, 4, 5 years sober, and the bands were warming up and the cheerleaders were running around. All of a sudden I realized I had tears just rolling down my face because here was another piece of my life back that I hadn't even missed it. I didn't even know it was gone, you know, and that's happened over and over and over. But one by one, you know, the cheerleading, everything, my grades plunged. I mean, the first year I drank, I was a poster child for adolescent treatment. My grades plunged, my friends changed, my appearance changed. I mean, the whole thing is your child doing this. I was doing all of them. But for whatever reason, I just kind of slid through. And I would have consequences, but never what they should have been. You know, I was kind of like that guy that walks down the sidewalk in the cartoons and the safes and the pianos are crashing behind him. I got caught skipping school. We got suspended. There was no school the next day because it snowed, so there's nothing on my record. I mean, that kind of goofy stuff happened to me all the time. I totaled a car with 3 other people in it, and I got no DUI. I got no license suspension. I just got a bill for the bridge from Butler County. I hit a bridge. They billed me for it. And I don't want to tell you how long ago this was, or it speaks to my age, I guess. But it was $40.80 to repair the bridge with county union labor. Itemized bill. 1 8-foot section of guardrail, 4 nuts, 4 bolts, 2 hours of labor. Anyway, when I drank, my life changed, and I relaxed, and I didn't need those activities anymore. I was okay, because without it, one of the things I never could do, and this whole thing with the room separating into 2 groups, is that I don't know how to talk to you. I don't know what to say after my name's Beth. What do you say after my name's Beth? Because I just... I'll say my name's Beth, and you'll say my name's Dixie, and now I know it's my turn to talk, and so I'm going to talk any minute, and now everybody in my head is starting going, say something, you look like an idiot, you're just staring at her, well, don't talk now, you look dumber. What if you say something stupid after? What are you going to say? Nice weather, you're in the Keys, So I end up paralyzed, staring at Dixie while everybody in my head's fighting about what to say. So, so I just have to leave, And of course now I can't come back here again because, I look bad. And I tried college that way. It doesn't work. I went off to college. I was another 196 percentile SAT scores and a .8 at the end of my first semester. Because, and I wasn't drinking in college. I didn't do my research. I ended up being a 17-year-old freshman in the middle of a 21 state. It was miles to any state line. It was a nightmare. And so I didn't drink a lot, and I couldn't have told you that fear kept me out of class. I didn't know. When I did my first inventory, the only reason fear was on it was because the one in the big book had fear, 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 fear. And I figured if it was on every one there, that was probably a hint, So I wrote it on mine. But I had no clue that fear ran my life. I didn't know. The big book talks about the world and its people dominated us. When it's talking about doing the inventory, that we find we were dominated by people. And I didn't understand that. Because I drank with the big boys, because I could. I had a huge capacity for alcohol. I drank with the boys because I could. One of the worst moments of my life is the first time I came to AA and they said, hang with the women. I just thought, you don't understand. I didn't even drink with women. To me, women, when you're younger, it's the girls, and they fall down and they throw up and they giggle and they wear pink in public and they, and you get a little older and you all like the same guy, or perhaps I'm sleeping with your husband. It's too messy drinking with women. And so I drank with the boys because I could. And I ran with bikers, and I just, they were all big and tall. And while I never actually fought anyone, completely out of fear of getting humiliated in public, not any high moral standing, I must have looked like I would hurt you if you messed with me. So people just kind of stayed away from me, and so this being dominated by people I didn't understand, and what I've come to understand is what dominated me was what you thought of me. That's what ran my life. What do you think of me? Who do I have to be to get you to like me? Who do I have to be to get you to include me? Who do I have to be to get you to accept me? That ran my life. And when you're living multiple lives, it starts to get confusing on who did you tell what to who, and I just lived in constant fear that you were going to find out who I really was, constant fear, and that ran my life. So anyway, of course, I didn't know any of this at the time, and I couldn't go to class because of this terror of, I don't know what to say after, hi, my name's Beth. I just don't have a clue. So I quit going to class, and I went back to Oxford, Ohio, figuring I had disgraced my parents because everybody's watching, and so I got a job in a bank because that was the next respectable thing to do if I wasn't going to be in college, and, banking and me just wasn't working. They worked Monday mornings, and I'm not a Monday morning kind of a girl, and so, as luck would have it, in April of 1978, a friend of mine decided on the spur of the moment that he wanted to go to Florida And I had always wanted to go to Florida, so we moved just overnight. Hey, let's go. Okay, and we moved to Bonita Springs, Florida. Now, I heard a guy say that when I was new, he said, they should put a sign at the state line of Florida, California, and Arizona that says, this state doesn't work either. And save us all a lot of time, But the sign wasn't up, so we drove on down here and moved to Bonita Springs in April of 1978. There were 2 traffic lights and a dog track. That was about it. 75 didn't even go down there yet. And I got a job in a convenience store because I was 19. I had worked in a King Quick in Ohio. They had Shop and Goes or whatever down here. And what I didn't know was it was so transient in Bonita Springs that if you went to work 3 days in a row, you were management material. So by the time I called my parents to tell them that I had moved to Florida because I neglected to mention I was leaving, I ran away from home is what I did. My mother reminded me later I was of age and she couldn't have stopped me, but that never occurred to me. It just took me till I was 19 to get up enough momentum to go. And I called and said, oh, but don't worry, I'm assistant manager at this store, and she said something she said to me a lot, which was, how can you do something this stupid and land on your feet? It just made her crazy, She had this odd idea that there should be consequences for your actions. I never got that. But I was in this convenience store, and I got there in April, and by December, I was already running out of options. I mean, I was going to have to move back to Ohio because I couldn't support myself. I drank my way out of that job because once I got down to Florida, the controls were off, And I mean, those were my people down there. Now, I hear some people say when I got to AA, I knew I was home, and these were my people, and that was not my experience in AA, but that was my experience in Bonita Springs. I mean, the whole town was 3 miles long, and they bought beer on this end of town to drink on the way to the bar on this end of town. Those are my people. And but I was running out of places to work. I was running out of people to date. Dating being what it is when you're an alcoholic woman. I was pretty friendly when I drank, and I thought of it as social drinking. The more I drank, the more social I got, and and then if you like them the next day, they stay in your dating. Isn't that how you do it? And so I was out of potential dates, and luckily this guy moved into town from California. He missed the sign too, and he moved in, and he had everything I was looking for. He had a house, a car, and a job, and he was 6'2" with a Harley and tattoos, and it was just it was love at first sight for the first 3 weeks, and then it was a power of the wills after that, But so anyway, I got my hooks into him. This is the one night stand that lasted, ended up being a 5-year marriage, and it was, it was crazy. We ended up living in the Keys. We came down here 4th of July weekend of 1982, shortly after the Conch Republic had seceded, and we liked it. We went back on Tuesday, moved on Friday to the Upper Keys to Islamorada, just like with $400 and a 6-month-old baby. We moved, and I got a job in a restaurant there on the property, Holiday Isle property, as the assistant manager. Hey, Mom, we moved to the Keys, but don't worry, I'm assistant manager. Crash. And I ended up going in, and I mean, when Bill Wilson talks about I had arrived, I knew what he meant. I mean, I'm working on this multi-million-dollar oceanfront property. It was a skinny year. I had this little blonde baby. I was bikini size, I mean, I got into the night audit. I didn't really know what a night auditor did, but I thought, oh, what the heck. And they doubled my salary, and they gave me the keys to all 7 bars on the property, That was the best job I ever had. And my job was to go around and ring out all the bars, and I'd have a drink at this one, a drink at this one, and 2 drinks at that one, and a drink at this one. All the security guards there were bikers. It was just a wonderful place to work. And, I look back and go, could that really have happened? It's kind of surreal looking back, but that's just how it was back then. And it was kind of expensive to live down here even then. And so we started a little part-time business on the side. I didn't really want to be I didn't want to have a big thriving business. I just wanted a little extra money and a little extra recreation. And so we had this little part-time business going, and I thought of it as a part-time business, which is what it was like a part-time job. And when you say that to probation officers, they look at you weird. because Monroe County called it sale of a controlled substance. And that was the first trouble I got in. I thought I might not get out of. And but we kind of came through that. And by now I want out of my marriage, because I know it's his fault. But I'm not leaving. I'm not never ever ever say you made a mistake. So I just drank until he couldn't stand it and threw me out. And I was so on the outside I'm going, well, Kurt, this isn't a cooling down period. If we go, we're gone. Because you threw us out. But inside I was like, yes, finally. And somewhere in that time period, I lived in the Keys from 82 to 84. And somewhere in there, I had gotten fired from my job because I went to happy hour at 5 and I was still there at 11 when I was supposed to clock in. And they weren't real happy with me, so they fired me. And so I went to an AA meeting. I mean, I had been to some meetings with my dad, if I was home visiting. But when they went around and introduced themselves, I would say, my name's Beth, I'm with him. But I went to the Tuesday night Key Largo group of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's the first time I ever said I was an alcoholic, and they were very nice, it was a small group with chairs in a circle, and they all, one talked, and the next one could really relate to that, and I just thought, oh my God, I was 24 years old. They invited me to Perkins after the meeting. I don't know about you, but if I'm 24 invited to Perkins at 9:30 at night, my life is over. So, but I went back to work and told them that I knew I had a problem and I was going to AA, and they gave me my job back because, they had put the weekend girl up to full-time and she didn't want to work full-time and everybody hated her. So, they put her back down to weekends. I got my job back after one AA meeting. I went to the Friday night Key Largo group of Alcoholics Anonymous, told them I got my job back, and that was pretty much the end of my AA in the Keys. But I called my dad and told him that I'd been to a meeting. That was the one significant thing that happened down there. And within a week, I got a box from him, and it had a big book, and a 12 and 12, and a 1 day at a time, and a 24-hour-a-day book, and a each day a new beginning book, and a tape of his talk, and the acceptance pamphlet, and a few bookmarks. I mean, it was all, they weren't doing T-shirts back then, so I didn't get a T-shirt, but, I don't know how many years he'd been just throwing it in the box, thinking, oh, here's another one, okay, but by God, he got it in the mail the day I said I went to a meeting. And, I ended up with this divorce. I wanted to relocate in Florida. We had 2 children now. I had a baby, and Robbie was 2. And my mother wouldn't send me money to relocate in South Florida. I can't imagine why. She wanted me where she could keep an eye on me. So against my will, a series of bad breaks and misunderstandings, I relocated to Cincinnati, Ohio in 1984. And I knew, all right, I'll try AA again. I kind of vaguely suspected, sensed that maybe drinking was causing me a few problems. Because, one thing I never did was wonder aloud if I was alcoholic. I hear people speak sometimes and they say they sat in the bar and said, oh, well, I'm alcoholic, what the heck. Well, with a parent in AA, that's a luxury that you don't get sometimes, because I kind of intuitively sensed that if I ever put the A word in a sentence with my name, that the AA police would swoop in and hand me a meeting schedule and a big book. So I never, I might be drinking a little too much, or I need to cool off, or not do this, or I'll just do these, or I won't drink when I take these. I tried all the combinations it does in the book, because I was a child of the 70s, and we had many other recreational outside issues besides alcohol. And, but what happened when I got here and really looked at all that, I didn't struggle with, am I a drug addict or am I an alcoholic? Because one by one, as I continued to drink, anything that interfered with my drinking had to go, and that included drugs. The more I got into my drinking, the more the drugs interfered with my drinking. So I had to, there were some, this drug, if I did it, it just meant I blacked out at 8 o'clock instead of midnight. So I quit doing them. If I tried to smoke, by the time I was 25, if I smoked pot after even having 2 beers, I was paralyzed, and you can't drink when you can't move. So I quit smoking pot. And then I have my I'm not drinking drug of the powdered variety that was very prevalent down here. Nothing tastes good with that. And then, the only thing I missed periodically was the diet pills, because I look back and I go, I could drink for days, I was skinny, and my house was clean, But I had to quit doing them by the time I was 25 or 26 because even I hated me after a day of those. So, it all came down to the alcohol. And my children went, my employability went, my integrity went, anything that was between me and a drink had to go. And I briefly tried AA in Cincinnati. It was Young People's was in its heyday in 1984. There was a Monday night Young People's meeting that had 200 people at it. There was a Friday night live meeting. But the same thing happened. I walked in, 2 groups, all of you and me. And what do I say after, hi, my name's Beth? Because I'm certainly not going to tell you I'm new. Because new people, we just don't look that good when we're new. I love when there's a guy in California named Vince Y that speaks some, and he says, if you're new, we already know a lot about you. For starters, we know it hasn't been a good year. So I don't want you to know I'm new. I want to look like I've been there for a while. So I'm certainly not going to stand up with the new people. And I tried some meetings, but I just couldn't. You guys all knew each other. You were all talking AA. It must be how nice for you. You had this God thing going. How nice for you. I just couldn't do it. And so I went to the bar, because that's what I know how to do. I was a bar drinker. I loved to drink in the bars. And Steve's right. Chuck and I were in North Carolina about 6 months, and we looked around and went, where are the bars? There are no bars in Wake County. We finally figured out you have to have 40% of your revenue has to come from food sales or something. That's a lot of pickled eggs. So they just don't have bar. Now, Cincinnati, there's, 4 corners, 2 bars, 2 churches. That's how it is up there. But I went to the bar and I thought, well, I'll drink in a nicer bar. My mom's neighborhood, the whole place kind of stepped out of an LL Bean catalog, so I thought I'll try there. And I went in there and got a drink and went to play a video game, mind my own business. And the only guy in the whole bar with a Harley shirt sent me a drink, and I just thought, how do they know, And then I found my home away from home, Norwood, Ohio. And, I bet you were there, Scott. And, biker bar, pool table, jukebox, my kind of place. And I just, because I can walk into a bar with $5 alone and be fine. If I got money for a drink or two and money for the pool table, I'm good. I'm good to go because I can shoot pool all night on 50 cents. I shot pool well. Beyond good for a girl. I just shot pool well. And I just, that was my comfort zone. And and many more potential dates there too, of course. And I just, by 1985, I was there a year, and I was a single mom, I had these 2 little kids, they're 1 and 3, and one night they were asleep, and there was nothing to drink in the house, and I walked down the street to the bar, and I figured they'd be okay, and my son woke up while I was gone, and he couldn't find me. He came outside and cried, and somebody called the police, and I was arrested for child endangerment. And, it was suggested to me that I go through treatment, because you might not go to jail if you go through treatment. And since I was looking at 6 months in jail, treatment was sounding okay. I ended up in an all-female treatment center. I don't know how that happened. God's cruel joke. And it was 6 weeks long, but I didn't want to go to jail. That's why I went to treatment. And I was the one the counselors would come get to talk to other people, other women who didn't want to leave their kids for 6 weeks. And I would tell them, it's better 6 weeks now than forever later. If we're not sober, we can't be parents. I could talk the company talk, you know what I mean? I was, even in the mid-'80s, it wasn't that common to have a sober parent. I was the only one there that already had a big book. I had a tape of my dad's talk, and I'm a test taker, School's easy for me, so I can absorb it, spit it out on a test, and forget I ever read it, which doesn't work well in AA. It helps if you retain what you read eventually. And so I was most likely to stay sober in treatment. And if you can be president of treatment, that would have been me. And, but the thing was, this double life that the book talks about was already developing. Because I looked around and I realized, I was glad my kids were gone. My mother took custody of my children. And, Hamilton County actually took my children and then placed them with my mother. And what I knew was at my mother's house, she read them a story every night. They got a bath every night. They were at daycare on time in clean clothes every morning. They had dinner at an appropriate time and age-appropriate food every night. I couldn't do that. My kids got pizza and SpaghettiOs, I couldn't do it. And I really hated my mother for doing it, But this big secret was building in my life, which was I didn't want my kids back, I didn't know how to be a mother. Now, I never set out to be a bad mother. I didn't beat the kids, I didn't. I'm sure I yelled at them because I was just edgy. But the message my children got from me over and over and over was, I love you, go away. I love you, get away from me. Go play, go clean your room. No, I don't want to go to the zoo. I don't want to color. Get away from me. Go play. Of course I love you, honey. And what a miserable thing to do to a kid. And my kids were invisible around me. I didn't know, I told you, I didn't know I was a thinker. But I was so far into my head that my kids could be looking right at me, talking to me, and I'd be staring and nodding and looking right through them, not hearing a word they said. And I knew that on some level. I knew they were better off at my mom's. And I kind of knew I wasn't done drinking, too. The big lie a lot of us, especially what those of us with sober parents have, is, well, it's not bad enough yet, and AA will always be there when I need it. And over the years, we have buried some people who said, I'll go to AA tomorrow. Because what I didn't understand was that when I'm drinking, I don't have the power to say it's bad enough. I better hope I surrender between drinks and then do something to stay surrendered. And that's what happened in 1988. I surrendered a lot of times. And I can look back in my life and see more than one time that God removed the obsession to drink. Anytime I ever asked Him, He was there. But, every prayer in the big books followed with action. And I never did a thing beyond ask God to remove it. So usually within a day or 2 days or 2 hours, the voices in my head would start, oh, you may as well drink. You're going to anyway. When I first got out of treatment, I didn't want to drink. And I went and bought a bottle of wine because, that's just kind of habit. Reflex, Wild Irish Rose. It's square. It doesn't roll out from under the car seat. That's important. And I drove around with it in my car for a week because I really didn't want to drink. And finally, I just remember holding up the bottle thinking it just didn't seem real that one little bottle could cause so much trouble, because I don't know how to beat Beth, and he died, and I was the only child of divorced parents, so the insurance money came my way, and that allowed me to drink the way I wanted to drink for the next 2.5 years, bottom line. And by the end of 1987, the money was gone, and I was tired. And I remember in 1987 one night just hitting the wall with it and just thinking, I cannot live like this anymore, and just crying and asking God to help me. And I remembered this big book that my dad had sent, and I found it. Now, I'd been living in a friend's attic apartment. Well, it wasn't even an attic apartment. It was just an attic. And, 2 rooms. And I'd been there since August. It was December. I hadn't unpacked. There was just a path, to the couch and the TV and the bed. But I remembered this book that my dad had sent me, and I opened it up because, I had it in treatment too. And they tell you when you go through treatment, the instructions for living's in here, the plans for living's in here, read the big book, the answers are in there. Well, I didn't read all the Roman numeral stuff because I thought if they wanted you to really read it, they'd make that page 1. And, so I would be ready to find the instructions for living, and I'd open up to page 1, and it would say war fever ran high, and I would just think, I'm screwed, what does this have to do with me? Bill's story, great. He's old, he's dead, who cares? And, now I know that Bill's story was put in the front of the book. They didn't have speaker meetings on every corner when they brought that book out. And Bill's story he did what I'm doing now. One man telling what he was like, what happened, and what he's like now. And they put it in the book so that maybe somebody would identify and go on to chapter 2. Bill's story is a speaker meeting in print. That's all it is. And but I didn't know that. But that night I pulled it out, and I read Bill's story, and I identified with Bill Wilson for the first time, and I fell asleep, and I really slept that night, I slept. I didn't just pass out. And when I woke up the next morning, I felt better. I felt okay. And, again, I believe God had removed the obsession to drink. I do. And, but I didn't call anybody. I didn't go to a meeting. I didn't read any more in the book, and by the end of the day, everybody up here has gathered and decided we should just get it over with and drink because we're going to drink sooner or later anyway. What the heck? And that just set off kind of the next few months. We're just kind of intermittent drinking and not. And culminating with my, I bet everybody in Florida misses me trip at the end of June of 1988. And I already told you what happened here. And on Sunday morning, June 26, 1988, I was in the Fort Myers airport. I had come down here, by the way, on my mother's credit card, unbeknownst to her, because, of course, I didn't have one, and I didn't have any money. And I'm real grateful that back then $3,000 was a huge limit on a credit card, or I'd probably be in prison. But I was in the airport, and I was tired, and the credit card was tired, and it wouldn't get a plane ticket home. Now I'm in the Fort Myers airport. I don't even have $1. I have one of those hangovers, And I just, I couldn't. If I'd had enough for one drink, somebody else would be standing here. If I can get one drink, I can get two. There was hope in that bottle. There was always hope in that bottle. I wondered after I got sober why I drank the last 2 years I drank, because it's not like I didn't know about AA, and I was pretty miserable the last 2 years. And then I heard a guy hit it on the head one night. He said he knew he was going to be miserable if he didn't drink, and he'd probably be miserable if he drank. But there was that shot that tonight was the night he'd have a good time. There was hope in that bottle. And I didn't have $1, and I couldn't bear the thought of being asked to leave the airport bar because it would have been obvious that I was sitting there waiting for somebody to buy me a drink. So I reviewed my other options, and I thought about just snatching the purse from a little old lady. There's a lot of retired people there, But I had one of those hangovers, and I knew I would pick on the little old lady who still did aerobics twice a week, and she would run me down and take her purse back, and I would look really bad. And so I called my mom and asked her to, if she would fly me home. And that's the first she knew even where I was. And she made me call her back later because she didn't know if she was going to do it or not. And when I called her back, she said, all right, I got a plane ticket, but you need to know I'm not flying you home. I'm flying the children's mother home, and it's only because we're afraid we'll never see you again if we don't, And I got on the plane, and I got off in Cincinnati, and she dumped me off at the local detox center, and I was not happy. But she just said, go in or don't. Go in or don't. But I can't do another thing for you. I got you back here, and that's all I can do. And thank God she did that, because for the first time, I was totally and completely accountable for my own recovery. Because one of my favorite games is let me make it your job to see that I get my work done. I did it to my teachers. I did it to my parents. I tried to do it to my sponsors when I periodically passed through AA. I'd get one, so if you asked me, I had one, but she never called me as much as I thought she should. Nobody was chasing me down to see if I went to meetings. Nobody was chasing me down, making me work steps. And so, of course, I didn't. And, in AA, I was accountable for my own recovery. And I was in this. I got out of detox on Friday at 4:30. Well, the other major thing that happened was the next morning I was reviewing my options in Ohio, which were few to none. And every single thing I could come up with, I had already tried and it had failed. There was nobody left to borrow money from. There was nowhere left to live. I had burned every bridge. And I was 29 and a half years old, and I never thought I would live to be 30. I never thought I would live to be 30. I shouldn't have. I drove drunk constantly. I had my own Harley Davidson. I rode motorcycles when I couldn't walk. I bartended places where people shot at each other. I had been mixing drugs and alcohol for 14 years. I should have been dead over and over and over. And what occurred to me that morning laying in that detox bed was that I was 29 and a half years old and I was distressingly healthy. That nothing was happening, and that if I was going to be dead, I would have been dead by now. And for me, the thought of living another 30 or 40 years the way I'd been living scared me to death, Now, if you ever hear Chuck talk, he came in from the other end. He knew if he took one more drink, he was a dead man. And a voice in him said, I want to live. And he went and called a friend of his that he had seen in AA. If you had told me, Beth, if you walk out of here and get a beer, you will be dead within 6 months, trust me, I would have gotten the beer. I would have gotten the beer. Dying didn't scare me. Living scared me to death. The only reason I never tried to kill myself is because on some level I knew I would live, And then once you try once and survive it, they watch you, I didn't want to be one of those cry for help people. And so I just had this passing thought laying in that bed of, whatever those AA people are doing seems to be working for them, and your way is certainly not working for you. Maybe you ought to do AA. Now, I didn't know that was the surrender that was going to save my life. I always thought I'd go out in a blaze of glory, down in flames, not me. When I surrender, it's just like, screw it, That's how I surrender. And I got out of detox on Friday, a 4th of July weekend. I knew if I went where I lived, I would drink. So I found a hotel room that was on the bus line because my car was impounded, too. I couldn't get that till Tuesday. I was going to go to this hotel for women. Now, you know there's been a big rearrangement there if I'm going to do that. Couldn't get in there till Tuesday. Knew if I went to Norwood, I would drink. So don't you think you get here like 3 years earlier if you drink in Norwood? I've always thought. Anyway, so I got this just cheap hotel on the bus line that had a pool and no bar. And I was going to skip a meeting the first night because, hey, I'd been going all week in detox. You know, I could take a day off, don't you think? But this voice in my head just said, if you don't go now, you're never going to go. And I walked out and I got on the bus and I went to 405 Oak Street, which is the clubhouse in Cincinnati. And the woman speaking that night, I had met 4 years before when I was passing through, and here she was 4 years sober. 4 years later, imagine that. And she spoke, and what she said from the podium floored me because she said that alcoholism, not alcohol, alcoholism, took her to the place where she didn't want to work, she didn't want to take care of her daughter, she just wanted to drink. And that was my biggest secret. How do you tell people that you don't want to take care of your kids? Talk about looking bad. I mean, I used to try to quit drinking every now and then, and when you don't drink, a lot of guilt can creep in 24 hours, and I would be, maybe have a decent day and my head would be almost to the pillow and the voices would all start, yeah, but you know what, Beth, you don't even want your own kids. Go fly that past your friends, I mean, you just can't tell people stuff like that. And here she was telling a room full of people that it was alcoholism that took her to the point that she couldn't care for her daughter. And that's what had happened to me. I was spiritually bankrupt. I was just empty. I was completely empty. I had nothing to offer those children. And so I got her phone number. And the next day I called her, and it took half an hour because that phone's heavy when you're new. If you're new and people give you their phone numbers, they're fair game. Call them. The people who don't want you to call don't give you their number. And we want you to call. And I, finally after half an hour of she's busy, she'll say, Beth who, all that stuff. I finally just called and said, this is Beth. I met you last night. I have no idea what to say to you, but I'm practicing using the phone. And she just laughed and said that's what she had to do. And this is what I tell new people now. Just call me and tell me you're practicing. Because, at 3 days sober, it's unlikely we're going to have a deep spiritual conversation when you call. I was doing good to remember my name at 3 days sober, let alone your name. But I knew how I could call and say I'm practicing. Because in AA, it's the most amazing thing. We take the action, God does the results. I do the action, God does the results over and over and over. So I started showing up in Alcoholics Anonymous. I went back the second night, Saturday night I went, and I still really didn't want to be new, and if you go, if you sit in the back, we know you're new. If you sit in the front, you have to talk to people. So I sat in the second row at Oak Street, and there was a wall right here, and, so I was just kind of, lessening as much contact as I could, and the meeting went, and, fine, it's time to say the Lord's Prayer. Well, now I got a wall over here. So there's no hand to hold for the Lord's Prayer. What a loser am I. Can't even say the Lord's Prayer right, and that's all it was going to take to send me out of there, because I'm sure everybody could see, and I just kind of hung my head, and somebody in front of me took my hand to pray, and I couldn't believe it, I started to cry halfway through. I couldn't even say the words to the prayer, and then halfway through I had to start uncrying, so I'd look okay when it was done, because I'm a tough broad. We don't cry. And but I've never to this day found out who that was that took my hand, But whoever it is, they need to know they're the reason I came back on Sunday. That's all it was going to take for me to go out the door was not having a hand to hold. And that kind of thing is 12-step work too. Sometimes we talk about 12-step work and 12-step calls and sponsoring a lot of people. But that is not all there is to it, I mean, that person did 12-step work that night. I came back the next day. Remembering a new person's name so you can greet them by name the next day. That's 12-step work. God, I just wanted you to know who I was, And I didn't even know that's what I wanted, so how could I tell you? If you had asked me, I couldn't have told you that. I could not have told you that I wanted to be one of many, that I wanted to belong, that I wanted a sense of purpose. If you had asked me, I would have told you I needed my driver's license, I needed a better job, and I hope to be in a real relationship someday. That's what I would have picked. I couldn't have verbalized I need to be one of many. Actually, who wants to be one of many? I mean, God, I could be the best or the worst. Just please don't make me be average. But my strength comes from being one of many. But again, I didn't know that. But somebody took my hand. I came back on Sunday. And I came back on Monday. And I started going to these big book meetings. 405 Oak Street had a noon big book meeting every day. And I had committed to myself that I was going to go to a meeting every day. I didn't do 90 and 90 because I'm an accountant by trade. And, if I have to do 90 and 90 by the end of day 3, I know I have 87 to go. And that looks very long. And so I just said I'm going to a meeting today. And when I got up, I will go to a meeting today. So I found these noon big book meetings. Now, I knew that you're supposed to read your big book every day, right? Well, they read a whole chapter at every meeting, so this should count. I shouldn't have to read at home. That's good. The meeting's over by 1. I have my whole day free. Also good. Reading the whole chapter chews up half of the hour, so chances were good I wasn't going to get called on to talk. Now, again, at 3 days sober, like they want to hear from me, right? But you know how we are. And so this is why I went to the big book meeting. It had nothing to do with learning about the book or getting sober. But a strange thing started to happen. Because they read the chapter out loud, I started to hear it. Because when I would try to read myself, my brain was sawdust when I was new. And when I would try to read the book myself, I would either realize I was 20 pages in and had no idea what I read, or I'd been sitting there 20 minutes and I was still on page 1, or I would really concentrate and try to read a paragraph. I'd read it 3 times and I'd close the book and it would just be gone. I couldn't retain a thing. And when you guys read it, I started to hear it. It started to sink in. And funny things were happening. I left a new meeting one day, and I was on my way just to run an errand. And everybody's still up here. They're still up there. I just don't check in with them very often anymore. And that day after the meeting, I popped in to see what we were all chit-chatting about. And one of the voices in my head was saying, that was pretty cool what Guy said at the meeting. And I didn't know that was in the book. And I just thought, dear God, even the voices in my head are getting sober, Okay. So they told me just to appoint a sober chairperson and get out of the way. So Now, God's cosmic joke on me was, I was done at 1 o'clock and had my whole day free, but about 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, I'd remember I had no life, and I was getting kind of antsy, so I would go back and do another meeting. So I did 2 meetings a day a lot, and I would do a speaker meeting at night, big book during the day, speaker meeting at night. And again, I just lucked into it. It was just luck, dumb luck that I did that, because I was in the solution at noon, and I was here in the solution at night. And sadly, there's a lot of meetings out there that are an hour of the problem, And because I was in literature meetings, and I started noticing there was laughter in that meeting, people were laughing, and they would read the book and they'd relate it to their life and what was happening with them right now. And they had been sober forever in there. I started noticing it wasn't new people trying to learn the book. The people in this meeting were sober, 4 and 5 and 7 years. Forever, So, God's biggest joke on me was that people who go to big book meetings on purpose tend to read the book and do what it says. And I had unwittingly plopped down into the middle of the most active people in Cincinnati, Alcoholics Anonymous. And they just dragged me right in, They had me answering phones at intergroup. I was doing 2 meetings a day. When I was about 3 weeks sober, somebody said, Beth, you've been around before. Why don't you just write an inventory and get it over with? And I thought, okay. I didn't know I could not be ready. So I wrote I sat down with a book and followed the directions, and I wrote a 4th step, and I called the woman who didn't want to take care of her daughter and asked if she would hear my 5th step, and she became my first sponsor. I was into the steps. I was making amends early, and I have never looked back. I could not have gone 4 months or 6 months or a year without doing an inventory and not drank. I couldn't have done it, I had to work the steps to stay sober. That prayer followed by action. And things, my life just took off. It just took off. The book says we'll be rocketed into a 4th dimension of existence of what we had not even dreamed, It doesn't say a word. If that's for me, just take a message. God calling. It is Sunday morning. But, you know, the book says we're rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence. It doesn't say a word about falling off a pink cloud, you know, and thank God nobody said that to me when I got happy. I don't know. I think the well-meaning people who rush up to newcomers who are happy and say, oh, you're going to fall off that pink cloud, I just always want to ask them, if are you doing what you did when you were new? Maybe you'd still be up there. Okay, I had to slide one soapbox in there. I'm done. Kind of like every now and then you go, oh, did I say that out loud? Anyway, I got busy. I started taking my kids to meetings with me. You know, they were still in my mother's custody, and I brought them with me on weekends. You know, not so they'd be part of my recovery, but because I knew that I would kill them if I went 3 days without a meeting. And they started coming with me. They were 4 and 6 when I got sober. Now an odd thing happened. You know, because I told you I'm not an intuitive mother. I don't know how to talk to my children. I don't know how to talk to anybody. And I started bringing them with me, and you guys taught me how to talk to my children. I watched you with them, and when they spoke to you, you greeted them by name. You sat down in a chair so you could talk to them eye to eye. You stopped what you were doing. You asked them to color with you. You took them with you to get coffee cups and this and that. You played Game Boy with them. And their gazes started to come up off the ground too. And they began to look the world in the eye too. And they got comfortable in Alcoholics Anonymous. They knew it was a clean, safe place where Mommy went. And I kept showing up, and you know, when I was a year sober, we went to this picnic, and you know, there were kids playing. It was an AA eating meat, the usual thing. And when we got there, I said, you know, if you want to go play, go ahead. Well, they never did. They always hung out with me, which was fine, but I always gave them the option. And that day, about half an hour later, I felt a tug on my pants leg, and it was my son Robbie, who was 7 years old, and he said, Mom, I just wanted you to know, if you need us, we're over here playing. And what I realized was, you know, every now and then God picks up the curtain and I get a peek. And then what I realized was that was the day they knew if they let me out of their sight that I would be there when they got back. You know, that they no longer had to stay glued to my side. It was okay to go play. And thank God I knew that's what was going on. And thank God I never tried to make them go play before. I just let them be. You know, I just let them be. And by 15 months sober, I had a car, a license, and insurance all at once. That was a big deal. Thanksgiving of '89 rolled around. They do a big Thanksgiving dinner thing at Oak Street, and at 1 o'clock I went for the noon meeting. You know, now by Thanksgiving, of course, I'm coming up on a year and a half sober, and I got a little job, little car, little efficiency apartment, and I got this little boy who's got all these women in his life. You know, my mom, me, his sister, and so I'm really thinking that for his sake, you know, he needs some men in his life, and for his sake, I should probably start looking around, you know. People laugh. I just want you to know that's the kind of loving, giving mom I am. So we went to this 405 Oak Street thing, and I went to the noon Big Book meeting because that's what I do at noon. And when I came out, I couldn't find my son. And somebody said, oh, look across the street. There was a schoolyard over there. And there was Robbie and another 7-year-old boy and 4 of the guys from Oak Street who were in their 20s, and they were over there playing football. And again, the curtain lifted for a minute, and I thought, where else should a little boy be on Thanksgiving Day except playing football with a bunch of guys? But the bigger revelation was knowing that I had absolutely nothing to do with making that happen, except I went to my noon meeting, and God met his needs too. And, you know, for whatever reason, I took that to heart. You know, it's like I realized that if I did what I needed to do in AA, my children's needs got met too. I didn't need to work on them. And so I called off the manhunt briefly, and, you know, because, I mean, that's the deal. Again, a guy said, a lot of things got said in early sobriety that have just always stuck with me. And there was a guy in Cincinnati who said he really thought God gave us AA to just keep us busy and out of his way so he could run our lives. That makes a lot of sense to me. You know, the more I did AA, when I got here, my sobriety was cheap. I had nothing to lose by doing it. Nothing. And I did some meetings, and I got a little job, and I did some more AA, and I had a place to live, and I did some more, and I spent time with my kids. And it's like my life is this scale, you know, and I do AA over here, and God fills this side up, you know, and I stay like this. And what happens, I think, sometimes is we start getting these gifts from God, and now we're going to help Him, you know, and it's like, well, thanks for this job, God, but now I need to really skip meetings so I can work a lot and impress them, you know, and my side of the scale starts to get light. Thanks for this relationship, God. Now I'm going to stay home and work on it. You know, my side of the scale gets light. And And I need to put everything I have over here. That's the balance in my life. Putting 100% into Alcoholics Anonymous brings me balance. I always cringe when people say they need balance in their lives, because I don't know about down here, but in Cincinnati that was code for I'm going to cut meetings, watch me. I need balance, watch this. And what can you say except good luck, keep in touch, But, life just took off. Chuck and I, when I was a year sober, I guess a year and a half sober, actually, is the first time I ever laid eyes on Chuck. He was speaking at 405 Oak Street, and it was kind of, I knew everybody there. I got sober there. I was a bar drinker, knew everybody there. I got sober at Oak Street. I knew everybody there. I didn't know them quite as intimately as I knew everybody at the bar, thank God, But so Chuck shows up to talk, and I'm thinking, well, I've never even seen this guy. How sober can he be, And then he gave this great talk, and I said to myself, I want what he has, and I am willing to go to any lengths to get it. But actually, we didn't start to date for another year, but he did give a good talk. He got sober 6 months after me, so I remind him of that at every opportunity. I love this time of year because right now I'm more sober than him, so I can help him. In December he catches up, and then I have to be quiet again. But anyway, we started to date about a year later. We didn't actually say the dating word for a while because we didn't want to jinx it, because he had dated about like I had before, and so we made a decision to get to know each other. We made a decision to keep our clothes on and get to know each other. We actually courted. AA dating really is coffee before the meeting or coffee after the meeting, and then you're never sure whether you should kiss goodnight or say the Lord's Prayer. But it worked for us, and he asked me to marry him, and the kids were happy about that, and I was happy about that, and we set the wedding date a year away, and because we had some financial things to clean up first before we married each other's credit, and that's what happens when you ask an accountant to marry you. And, but as that year progressed, we just wanted more and more to get married, and we have a great time. We were married 13 years last month, and we still have a great time, It's like we decided we would try to never be higher than third in each other's lives. That God was first, AA was second, and then we would be third in each other's lives. And I always tell them, on a good day he's third if I'm not thinking about me. He's fourth sometimes. Well, a lot, but, My first thought is still, yes, but what about me? But, we've learned to be married here, too. We watch people with successful marriages. My sponsor's Peg M. from Bellevue, Nebraska. She's 41 years sober. She's married 39 years. She has what I want. And actually, my sponsor-in-law, her husband, sponsors Chuck now. We both changed sponsors. Peggy's been my sponsor for 10 years. And it's just, she's an amazing woman, and she has what I want. She's still active. I can't ever complain about anything I do because she is miles ahead of me. But we learned to be married watching married people. I learned to be sober watching sober people. I learned how to talk to my children watching you people. I have learned to do it. This is the first place I was that it became all right not to know. It was okay to ask a question. And some of the hardest words I said when I got here were, can I come with you? That's terrifying. How do you do that? I don't know how to do that. These are all words I had to learn to say here. And nobody laughed. They just said, we didn't know how either, come with us. And so the parenting thing, we're spending more time with the kids. One of the things that happened when I was a year sober is my mom and I talked about the children and where they should be. And we decided, that the greater good was not served in the name of family unity for me to drag the children down to where I was. They had been in a safe, stable neighborhood for 4 years. By the time I was a year sober, they were in one of the best school districts in the state. They'd had the same friends from nursery school now up into early elementary school. I was in an efficiency apartment on the 10th floor of a crappy section of town. It didn't seem like the greater good was served to suck them down to my level just to get the kids back. So Mom and I agreed that, because they had been doing what they were supposed to do. The only disruption in their life was me. So we decided they would stay with Mom and I would try to catch up closer to them so that they wouldn't have such a huge lifestyle change when they came back. And Chuck and I started a date and we got married and we bought a house. We got closer. We got it to Deer Park, which is right next to where they lived. And And a couple of things happened there. I was driving my daughter to school every day because she actually came to live with us a year before my son did, and we just left her registered in Madera schools. And I would drive her to school, and, it's very suburban out there. Now, you probably gleaned from my talk I was not exactly Miss Suburbia when I got there. And so I would pull up, and there would be minivans lined up, and then there'd be me, because it was all of them and me out there. And, and I would go, Sarah would get out to go into school, and I'd go to pull out, and the minivan in front of me is still there, so I'd have to pull out around them. And, this went on. So finally one day I thought, I was thinking things like, I wonder what they all do. Probably they don't have to work. They probably all go have coffee, So one day I thought, I'm just going to see what they do. I'm staying. And so, so I pull up behind the row of minivans, and the kid in front, in front of me, they get out, and Sarah gets out. And that mom watched until her child was safely into the building, and then she left. Now, it never occurred to me that Sarah wouldn't get safely into the building. It was 100 feet to the door, and the principal was on the sidewalk, But I remember thinking, that must be what mothers do. So now I'm ready, and the next day I pull up behind the minivan, and that kid gets out and goes in the building, and Sarah got out. She went into the building, and I watched her safely into the building, and then I pulled out, and the minivan ahead of me was gone, and I cried all the way to work. I just was like, I'm doing a mom thing. I can't believe it, because I don't have a clue. I'm not an intuitive parent. And then, we decided to get the kids bicycles, because they were getting to be that age. We got them bikes for Christmas, and we figured we better get them too, because they're little. So we got these Huffy bikes, and the first warm day, they're over for the weekend, and we're out riding our bikes. Mom, Dad, big brother, little sister. It's looking frighteningly normal, and we go past a guy who's out mowing his grass, because that's what they do in the suburbs. Apparently, they mow their grass, and he waved, because they wave out there too, and So we went to wave back, and about the time I waved, I got a look at where I was. For a brief moment, that zoom camera came back, and I saw where I was, and I just thought, oh my God, I used to own a Harley Davidson, and I'm riding through the suburbs on a lavender Huffy. How did this happen? But the most amazing part of that is right there, right then, there's nowhere I wanted to be but on that bike with those kids. And if that's not a miracle for somebody who didn't even want their children, I don't know what is. God changes hearts here. I do the same stuff to stay sober now that I did when I was new. I go to meetings, I read the book, I have a sponsor, I work with a sponsor, I work with other women. I do all the same stuff that I did when I was new. But God has changed my heart. And that's what happens here. He does the results. We do the actions. So it doesn't matter why you're here. I mean, you'll hear us say sometimes, we don't care how you feel, do it anyway. Well, there's a reason for that. It's because we do the action, God does the results. And I have been taken from a woman who did not want to care for her own children to somebody who couldn't wait to see them. Our family, I used to wonder if I get the kids back, and my sponsor would say it's in the book. Well, I'm kind of literal. So I'd be looking for, if you're a single mom who's remarried and your mother has your children, it's not in there. But a few years sober, I was reading through, and I just saw this little line that said, families will be reunited. And it was like, oh, well, son of a gun, it was in there, because we were reunited, and we're all so lost and so broken when we get here, and so incapable of caring for anybody else. And gradually, I began to rejoin the human race. Things happened to me like I would be driving down the road and an ambulance would go by, and I would have this thought that, that's somebody's mother in there, or that's somebody's son in there. And I would say a quick prayer that they were okay. And that was so foreign to me that I noticed when it happened. But I know now it was because gradually I was becoming one of many. I was becoming one of you. And I was forging this relationship with God as the result of working these steps. I did not turn my life over in step 3. If I could have, I wouldn't have needed step 4. The book says, as the result of these steps, we have this awakening. And in my life, and with God and you guys, and in my husband, my mother, has just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger as a result of showing up here. And some people never get their real families back, but look at what we get here. I mean, look at this. Sunday morning on purpose, and it's like, to me, AA is just like a gigantic reunion of the children of God. Families will be reunited. And what a deal. What a deal. We've been saying a lot this year. We'll do something and we'll just go, that wasn't even on my list. You know, I mean, they say if you could have made a list when you were new, how short you would have been. And I blew mine. You know, we're in North Carolina now. We live 65 miles from Pinehurst. And the U.S. Open was on Pinehurst number 2 this year. And we got tickets and we went down there. And Chuck, if you ever hear him talk, he wasn't exactly a high-bottom drunk either. And Thursday, we go into the grandstands. You know, we walk around and watch some golf. Then we go up and sit in the grandstands. And all of a sudden, we looked around like where we were, you know, and we're sitting on the 18th green at Pinehurst number 2 at the U.S. Open, and we just looked at each other and busted out laughing. I mean, what else are you going to do, you know? We're just looking at the people next to you thinking if you knew who was sitting next to you, you would run for your life, you know? Wasn't even on my list, you know? How do you get from an attic to Pinehurst number 2? How do you get from Norwood, Ohio, to Oceanfront and Key West? You know, how do you get from not even wanting your kids to treasuring a relationship with them? And how do you get from being a loner into being one of many and knowing that's where your path to usefulness is? You know, that's because of God and AA, and that's because of all of you. And I'm so glad you asked me, Katie. Thank you.
Wow. I just have to share this. This was basically a personal meeting here between the two of us, and I'm glad you guys could all attend this. We always talk about we're not sure who the meeting is for. This meeting was for me. It was choking me up as you were talking because this is the first time in 12 years I have not been able to go back to Cincinnati in the summer and be around my friends. Katie just asked me out of the blue. I just happened to show up at a meeting, and she said, well, pick something to do for God's sakes. How about chairing the 10? Well, the great spiritual stream of life that occurs here is no accident. The fact that I'm sitting next to Beth. I lived in Oxford, Ohio from 79 to 93. That's where I moved down here for. I went to Miami of Ohio, and I'm sure I've driven over that bridge that you hit. I got sober hanging around places like Smoke Street. You know, we complain about smoke down here. If you can't see it, it ain't smoking. And Oak Street will teach you that. It's just, that was a great talk. It was the class reunion that I've wanted here in Alcoholics Anonymous. You took me right back home. The last thing, and you can verify this afterwards, I kept looking at Beth, you know, as the memories were coming back in. I picture you coming into Tri-County's parking lot on a Harley in black with a black Harley headband. Did you ever do that? Yeah. Okay. I got to figure out who the hell that was because I could swear that was her.
Probably Cindy.
It's Cindy. Yes, it was Cindy. There you go. Excellent. Okay. Who else would know but another Cincinnati AA? Okay. At this point, we're going to pass the baskets in accordance with the 7th tradition, which states every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. While the baskets are being passed, will Patrick please read the 12 traditions?
Good morning. I'm Patrick. I'm an alcoholic. The 12 traditions. 1. Our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon AA unity. 2. For our group purpose, there is but one ultimate authority, a loving God as He may express Himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants, they do not govern. 3. The only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking. 4. Each group should be autonomous except in matters affecting other groups or AA as a whole. 5. Each group has but one primary purpose, to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. 6. An AA group ought never endorse, finance, or lend the AA name to any related facility or outside enterprise, lest problems of money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary purpose. 7. Every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. 8. Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. 9. AA as such ought never be organized, but we may create service boards or committees directly responsible to those they serve. 10. Alcoholics Anonymous has no opinion on outside issues, hence the AA name ought never be drawn into public controversy. 11. Our public relations policy is based upon attraction rather than promotion. We need always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films. And 12. Anonymity is the spiritual foundation for all our traditions, never reminding us to place principles before personality.
And we've asked Isabel to read the promises, please.
My name is Isabel. I'm an alcoholic. The AA promises. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them.
I'd like to turn the meeting back over to Dan. Dan?
I thought I was done. I didn't know I had any more announcements. Thank you, Scott, and thanks again for the speaker. I talked about very moving talk this morning, and I love the talk about families being reunited. It's a wonderful thing. I guess I've run out of notes. So now I'm and I've run out of ties too. So. I guess we'll just close this meeting in the usual way. If we could all stand.